He offered me the house and $50,000 to disappear quietly. I countered with $43,000, joint custody, and a folder full of truth. I was sitting at the far end of a conference table on the 14th floor when I slid that folder across the polished wood, floor-to-ceiling windows behind me, the May sun coming in sideways, my hands not shaking even a little. Across the table, my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, sat with his lawyer and his mother, and the three of them had gone very, very quiet. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That day, the folder, the numbers, I didn't walk into that room by accident. I walked into it because I died first. And then I woke up. Let me start where it actually began. The last sound Margaret Holloway heard was the click of the oxygen tube coming loose. She was 62, lungs drowning in fluid that wouldn't drain. And the man she'd married 40 years was standing beside her hospital bed with his fingers still on the plastic. David didn't look angry. He looked tired, which was worse. "If I had a choice," he said, flat and final, "I never would have married you." Then the beeping stopped, and everything went white. She woke to a shower run. For a second, she didn't know where she was. The ceiling was too high, too white, a fan humming instead of monitors beeping. She lifted her hand, smooth skin, no IV bruise, no hospital bracelet. She sat up too fast and the room tilted. Downstairs, a coffee maker gurgled. The clock read 6:47 a.m., March 14th, 2016. She stared. March 14th, the day after her 42nd birthday. David had forgotten it yesterday. Come home with a briefcase and a client dinner story. Hadn't mentioned it until she'd said something at night, then sighed and promised flowers to. She'd cried because flowers were better than, and she'd been the kind of woman grateful for better than. That was 20 years. Or it was two. The bathroom door. David walked out, towel around his waist, already reaching for it. He didn't let her. 40 years of mornings, and he never said good morning unless she said it. Morning, he said, padding toward the closet. Early sight meeting. There was already. She couldn't. He meant his black sugar in the blue mug that was his and own. Margaret swung her legs open. Her feet found the beige carpet she'd picked out in 2000. Sure. Her voice was younger, no rattle from the flu at the end. "I'll make mine too." He was already halfway into it. He didn't. Downstairs, she stood at the stove with her hand on. Then she took the mug. Hers. Not. She poured coffee, added half, and drank it leaning against. It was hot and bitter, and she tasted it. Really tasted it, which she hadn't been able to do in the last 6 months when everything was cardboard and. David came down 10 minutes late. "One mug, one plate, one slice of toast half eaten. Where's mine?" Mark looked up. She'd rehearsed this 1,000 times, screaming, crying, something. But standing in the morning light with her husband looking at her like she'd forgotten him, she found she did. Her own. He blinked. "What? Your own coffee. Your own toast. I'm more." Evenly, like saying the mail came or it might rain. She took another sip. He stared, then laughed. A short, confused sound. "Is the birthday? I told you to order flowers. The flowers are fine, David. I'm not mad. I'm just not making fist anymore." He studied her, shook his head, and went to the coffee maker. She heard him mutter something under his breath, probably mood, or some word that put her in a box, and she didn't care. She finished her toast, rinsed her plate. She put on a green blouse with white flowers, one she hadn't worn in years, in the mirror, 42. Lying around her eyes, gray temples, but alive. 42 and alive, and the. She drove alone. The Ashford Public Library on 3rd Street, 2 stories, windows. She'd worked there 11 years, part-time, because David said they didn't need the money but needed something to do. She'd always liked it. She'd love it. She sat in the parking lot for a minute, watching the sidewalk, a woman with a stroller, a kid on a bike, and old pigeons. She'd seen it 1,000 times. She'd never seen it. Started at 9. She reshelved books, helped a teenager find history paper sources, made a salad at her desk, enough for one. At 12:30, she told her supervisor she had an errand, and walks to the bank. The banker was young, nose ring, named Brittany. "What can I do for you?" "To open a checking account." "Just my name, joint owners." She had her license and social security card in her purse. Grabbed them this morning without thinking, the way you do when you know what you're doing. She transferred $2,000 from her personal savings, the money she'd been putting aside from library paychecks for years, the money David didn't because he never asked. Brittany printed form. Margaret signed. Walking back out into March air, The sun had come out and she felt some lightness and terror, like standing at a diving board and realized to jump. Finished her shift. At 5 she drove home. David was on the couch, half-eaten pizza box on the coffee table on TV. Ordered pizza. There's some left. I already ate, she said. An apple and a granola bar in the car. Asked him into the kitchen. He could feel his eyes on. Confused. That was fine. Confused for 40 years. She took out a pot, a can of soup, bread and cheese. 1 sandwich, 1 bowl. She carried it to the dining table. The one David bought because it seated 8. They never had more than 3 over. Down and ate slowly. Soup was hot. The cheese was melted and stringy. She ate every bite. When she put her bowl to the sink. David's on the counter, face up. He always left it face up, because he had nothing to hide, or she'd never look. Ian lit up. Karen. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Margaret looked at it. The name didn't surprise her. She'd learned about Whitfield in 2031. When she was 57, a necklace receipt in David's jacket, and he'd said it was a work gift, and she'd believe leaving was easier. 3 years after David married, she knew that too. She didn't know how. Maybe in the white space waking she'd seen things. Or maybe she'd always known and never let herself say it. She pressed the side button until the screen went dark and set the phone back exactly where it had been. Then she dried her hands and went upstairs to shower. Under water, she stood for a long time. And for the first time in 40, she didn't think about David. She thought about the green blouse and the bank account and the tomato in the sun on 3rd Street. She thought about tomorrow. And somewhere, much further ahead, she thought about a conference room on the 14th floor, and a folder, and a man who was about to learn what happened when you told a woman you never would have married her. Tomorrow came, and Margaret Holloway did not explain herself once. She woke up at 6:30, made her own coffee, drank it standing at the kitchen window while David slept upstairs. She did not wonder where he was going for lunch. She did not wonder if Karen would be there. She had wondered about those things for 40 years in another life. She was done wondering. By the end of the first week, the pattern was set. She made her own breakfast and her own lunch, and left his blue mug in the cabinet. She went to work and came home, and if David had already eaten, she made herself something small, and ate it at the dining table while he watched television in the next room. If he hadn't eaten, she didn't ask. He ordered pizza or heated up a frozen burrito and left the packaging on the counter, and she walked past it the way you walk past a stranger's trash on the sidewalk. David tried silence first. That had always worked before. He would stop speaking, stop making eye contact, leave the room when she entered, and within 2 or 3 days she would come to him, tentative, asking what was wrong, and he would say nothing, and she would try harder, and eventually everything would go back to the way it was. It didn't work this time. Maggie didn't seem to notice. She hummed sometimes while she washed her own dishes. She went for walks after dinner. She bought a novel at the grocery store bookstore and read it on the couch with her feet up. And when David sat down at the other end, she didn't look. On the 10th night, he couldn't take it anymore. What is wrong with you? He, standing in the kitchen doorway while she wiped down the. She was wiping only her side, the side she. The other side had a ring of coffee stain he'd left that. She set down the. Nothing. You're acting like you live in a hotel. You don't talk to me. You don't cook. You don't even. I talk to you when you to me. I cook for myself. I look at you when there's something worth. She said it with heat, which made David's face reddened. This is my Margaret. You can't just. It's our house. And I can. I've been doing your laundry and your cooking and your schedule for 20 years. I'm stopping. If problem, maybe you should have. He opened his mouth, closed it, and turned, walked out. She heard the front lamb. She heard his car start and peel out of the driveway. She went back to wipe. She was not surprised when Eleanor showed up. Eleanor Holloway arrived at 11. With Brit. She knew Maggie worked mornings at the library and had a half day. She let herself in with the key David had given her. The one Maggie had asked him to take back, and he'd said she was. Margaret, Eleanor said, setting her patent leather handbag on the kitchen table like a judge seeing evidence. This house. Maggie was sitting at the table with a cup of tea. Looked around. The house was not a mess. There was a stack of David's mail on the counter and his running shoe. That was it, Eleanor, Maggie said. If the house bothers you, welcome to leave. I have in an hour. Eleanor blinked. In 20 years, Maggie had never once say. She had taken the comments about the curtains and the garden and the way Lily dressed and the fact that they still didn't bathroom. And she had smiled and nodded and apologized and fixed whatever else. My son, Eleanor said, her voice sharpening. He'd tell her not speaking to him. You're refusing to cook. Difficult. David is a grown man. He can make his own toast. And I'm not difficult anymore. Maggie stood up, picked up her and carried it to the sink. I really have to get ready, Eleanor. I'll lock behind you. She walked upstairs. She heard Eleanor sputter something, then the slam. Tender her phone. David. Go to voicemail. That evening he was waiting for her when she got home. She could smell it. Called me, he said. She says you kicked her out. I didn't kick her out. Told her I had to go to work. She says you were rude. This house is a pigsty. David's voice was rising. What is the matter with you? First you stop cooking. You're attacking my mother. I'm not attacking anyone. Your mother came into my house and started criticizing it and told her I didn't have time for it. That's not that's boundaries. Boundaries. He said the word like it was a disease. Since when do you need boundaries? We've been married 20 years and suddenly you need boundaries? I was disappearing. The word hit her than she intended. She didn't look at him. Bed. She went upstairs. He stayed down there, and she heard him pacing. And then the TV went on loud, and she closed the bedroom door and lay in the dark and thought about the oxygen tube and the click and the word a choice. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried since she woke up. Nothing left to cry about. The community college was on the other side of town, a cluster of low brick buildings with a parking lot like wet asphalt. Maggie signed up for Tuesday night creative writing class. No credit. 8 weeks. From the new account. The classroom was fluorescent lit, arranged in a circle. The instructor was a woman in her 50s with a voice like warm honey. She went around the room and asked every name and why they were there. When it got to Maggie, I used to write. A long time ago, the instructor, welcome back, Margaret. There was a man sitting two seats to her left, maybe 50, with a gray beard and wire-rimmed glasses, book open in front of him. He raised his hand and asked who had written before. I'm an engineer, he said. Retired. I've been making up stories in my head for 30 years. It was time to write some of them down. His name was Marcus. He smiled at Maggie when the class, and she smiled back. And it was she'd smiled at a stranger in she didn't know how long. Not because she was interested in him, because he didn't expect anything from her. He didn't know she had a daughter, died once and come back. He named Margaret, who used to write. She drove home with the window down, the March air cold on her face. She felt something she hadn't anticipated. Not about the class, of a life that was hers. She was thinking about it when she walked into the house and saw David's briefcase on the kitchen table, a stack of papers spilling out. He'd gotten home early, left it there, gone upstairs to shower. Maggie was going to walk past. She really was. But the top paper caught her eye. It was a bank, not the joint knew about, a different one. She picked it up. The account was in David's name only. The balance was $1,412. Opening date was September 2003. They had been married 7 years. Maggie stood in the kitchen with the paper into the shower running upstairs. She thought about all those David had said they couldn't afford a vacation, couldn't afford to fix the roof, afford for her to work fewer hours. She thought about the year Lily wanted to go to summer camp and David had said it was too expensive and Maggie had paid for it with her library money and told him it was scholarship. She folded the statement carefully exactly where she'd found it. Then she went to the drawer where she kept her library ID and took out a small key she'd had for years, a key to a locked filing cabinet in the library administrative office where she kept personal things, put it in her purse. The shower stopped upstairs. David called down, Hey, did you order pizza? Maggie, the key warm in her palm. No, David, I didn't. Maggie made the copies on the library's administrative copier at 7:30 in the morning, before anyone else arrived. She had brought the statement home the night before, slipped it into her purse when David went upstairs to get his phone, told him she was taking out the trash, walked to the end of the driveway and stood there for a minute with the paper in her hand, like it was a live thing. Then she'd brought it back inside and hidden it in her purse, and waited until David fell asleep, and took it out and read it 3 more times by the light of her phone. The copier hummed. 3 copies. 1 for her locker at the library, 1 for the safe deposit box she was going to rent, 1 for, she didn't know yet, a lawyer. Maybe. She put the original back in David's briefcase before he woke up. He never checked. He never thought she would look. He had spent 20 years assuming she was too nice, too timid, too much his wife to go through his things. He was right about the old her. The new her had died once and come back, and had very little patience for assumptions. The lawyer's name was Patricia Voss. She had an office above a coffee shop on Main Street, a small window with a plant that looked like it was barely hanging on, and a receptionist who told Maggie to have a seat and then ignored her for 15 minutes. Patricia Voss was in her 60s. Short gray hair, no makeup, a blazer with elbow patches. She shook Maggie's hand and said, "What can I do for you, Mrs. Holloway?" "I'm not sure yet," Maggie said. "I think I want to know what my options." They talked for 45 minutes. Maggie told her about the marriage. 20 years, a daughter, a house, a husband who was a partner at an architecture. She didn't tell her about the She didn't tell her about the oxygen. She told her about the secret account, and Patricia Voss's pen stopped. 87th, Patricia said, in his name, opened during the... In Oregon, that's marital property. Everything earned during the marriage is community property, regardless of whose name is on the account. If he's been hiding income, that's something we can pursue in a divorce. But you'd need more than one statement. You'd need a paper. Maggie said it with a calmness that surprised Eve. Patricia looked at her over her glasses. "Mrs. Holloway, the question caught her. What? Is your husband violent? Physically? Emotionally?" Maggie about it. David never hit her. He had never thrown at her. But he had spent 20 years making her feel like she was too much and not enough at the same time. He had forgotten her birthday 11 hours. He had missed Lily's 8th grade graduation because of a client emergency that turned out to be He had told her that her mother died, that she should try to keep it together because they had people coming. Not violent, but not kind either. Patricia nodded. She wrote something on a notepad, a sheet. "My consultation fee is $100. If you did to move forward, talk about a retainer. In the meantime, gather everything you can. Bank statements, tax returns, emails. Don't confront him yet. Don't tell him you know. And if you have any money of your own, put it can't touch." Maggie paid with her debit card account. $300. It was the most money she'd ever spent on herself in one transaction. She walked out of the office and stood on and breathed. She was not prepared for what got home. It was in the kitchen, standing by the count's hand. He had sharing. They had set up 3 years ago, after Lily got her first phone and they wanted to be able to track her. David had insisted the locations. Maggie had not again. David checked hers. She didn't know he'd been checking it every day. "Community," he said, holding up the phone like evidence in a trial. "Tuesday nights. For the past 3 weeks. Tell me what's going on?" Maggie pursed down on the table. "Taking a writing class. A writing class." Like it was a punchline. "Since when do you write?" "Since I was 19. You just never asked." She kept her voice even. She was not going to do this. She was not going to defend herself for taking a $5 class. "Is that what this is about?" David's voice was rising. "You're having an affair with some guy at community college acting like this?" Words hung in the air between them. Maggie looked at her husband, 45 years old, gray at the temples, standing in their kitchen with her phone and his accusation on his face. And she felt open inside her. Not hurt. Something older. Something that held shut for 40 years. She didn't yell. She didn't scream. She spoke in a voice that was absolutely clear. "You want to know what's David? I'll tell you." She took a step toward him. "I'll tell you about the night I miscarried our second baby and you were at a site meeting and answered your phone for 6 hours. I'll tell you about my mother's funeral and how you were 2 hours late because you stopped to get your dry cleaning. I'll tell you about my 40th birthday and how you forgot, and when I cried you told me I was being dramatic. I'll tell you about every night I sat at this table alone, watched TV in the other room. And every morning I made your coffee and your toast and packed and you never once said thank you. And every time I talked to you about how I was feeling, you told me I was tired or stressed or hormonal, and you'd deal with it later came." David stepped back. His mouth was open. The phone was still in his hand, forgotten. "You remember all that?" And his voice was small. "Remembered any of it?" Maggie's eyes were dry. She had cried about all of this 1,000 times in her first life. She had no tears left. "I'm not having an affair. I'm taking a writing class. And I'm not acting like anything. Just finally acting like myself." She turned and walked. She didn't look back. Lily didn't speak to her for 3 days. She was 16. 16-year-olds had their wisdom, and Maggie knew that. But it still hurt when Lily came from school and went straight to her room. When Maggie knocked and asked if she... Lily said through the door, "Dad said you've been really stressed out. I'll just eat in my bed." "Of course." Maggie stood in the hallway doorknob and thought about explaining. Thought about saying your father has $87 in a bank account you don't know about. Been lying to us for 13 years. I'm awake. But she didn't. She couldn't. Not yet. Not until she had everything in place. She went back downstairs and ate it alone. She had made a decision. She was going to ask David for a separation. Not a divorce, separation. She would find a small apartment. She would tell Lily or as much of it as Lily could handle. She would stop waiting for and start changing her own life. She spent the afternoon looking at apartments online. There was a one-bed in the old part of town, above a booker, $850 a month, utilities included. She was going to call the landlord on day. On Sunday, her phone rang. It was David's office. Mrs. Holloway? A young woman's voice worried. There's been an incident at the site. David, he fell. He's for general. They think it's his leg. Maggie sat down on the edge of the bed. The apartment listing was still open on her laptop. She closed it. I'll be right there, she said. Ashford General was the kind of hospital that smelled like disinfectant and old coffee and fear, all mixed together. Maggie parked in the emergency lot and walked in through the automatic doors. The woman at the desk told her David was in radiology, had been taken for x-rays, would be up in a room in about 20 minutes. Maggie sat in a plastic chair by the vending machines and waited. She did not text anyone. She did not call Lily. She just sat. A woman walked past the waiting area, heels clicking on the linoleum, carrying a garment bag and a paper bag from the pharmacy. She was maybe 38, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing a tailored blazer and jeans. She stopped at the nurse's station and said something Maggie couldn't hear, and the nurse pointed down the hall. The woman turned. She saw Maggie. Their eyes met. Maggie knew her. She had never met her, but she knew her. She had seen her face in David's phone, blurry, in the background of a work photo, at a Christmas party 2 years ago. She had heard her name in a text message at 11 o'clock at night. She had imagined her 1,000 times in her first life, the woman who came after. Karen Whitfield looked at Maggie with an expression that shifted too fast. Surprise, then calculation, then a polite smile. You must be Mark. I'm Karen Whitfield. I work with David. She held out her hand. The garment bag was slung over her arm. The pharmacy bag had David's name in it. Maggie didn't take the hand. I'm his wife. Karen's smile faltered just for a second. Yes. David talks about you all the time. Maggie knew David didn't talk about her to anyone. She was the furniture in his life. Present, necessary, inevitable. I'm sure he does, Meg. If you'll excuse me, I should check on it. She walked past Karen without another. She could feel Karen's eyes on her. She dare. She had been dead once. A woman with a garment bag did not. David's room was on the 3rd floor, a double with the other bed. He was lying propped up on pillows, his left leg in a temporary splint, pale. The doctor had told him it was a fractured tibia. Clean break, would need surgery, 6 weeks of no airing, 3 months of physical. David had listened with the expression of a man who had just been told his car totaled. How are you feeling? Maggie said, pulling a chair. But like I fell off a ladder, he said. He tried to shift. They're saying surgery. At her. And for a moment something crossed his face. Gratitude, maybe, or ability. The kind of thing that only showed when he was hurt and didn't hide it. Thank, he said. And Maggie, the other night. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said, it's fine, she said. Fine. But she wasn't going to have this conversation in a hospital room with a nurse coming in every 10 minutes later. She spent the night in the bed. He slept eventually after the meds kicked in. He didn't sleep. She watched the monitors blink and listened to his breathing and thought about the apartment listing she'd closed on her laptop and the lawyer's card in her wallet and the copy of the bank statement. In her locker at the library, 3 a.m, David's face caught her eye. It was floor by the bed, the one brought from the site, his work briefcase, left at home. It was unzipped. Papers were sticking out. Not to. She told herself she was here because he was hurt. Time. She told herself all of those things, and then she leaned over and pulled the onto her lap. The top layer, project documents, blueprints, contract, invoices. Underneath, a manila folder. She opened it. There was a photograph, Karen, not at work, on a beach somewhere, sunglasses pushed up, smiling. On the back in David's handwriting, K 14. There was a receipt from a jewelry store in Portland. A silver necklace with a small sapphire, $20. Dated 2 months ago, Maggie had never received a sapphire necklace. There were emails printed out, correspondence between David and a financial advisor, Roger Chen. The subject line, asset and strategy. The emails discussed moving additional funds into the separate account, maximizing protection in the event of a dissolution, and ensuring primary beneficiary designation. Current wishes. Mag that phrase 3 times. At the bottom of the folder was almost missed. It was a copy of David's last will and testament, dated 5 years ago. She skimmed. House to Margaret, a allowance for life, personal effects to Lily, and got to the residue clause. All remaining assets, in all financial accounts, investment properties and business interests, to be distributed to my then living or domestic partner. Not Margaret, not by name. Whoever was there when he died. In 5 years, when he wrote this will, he had already been planning for a life after. He just hadn't told her. Maggie put exactly where she found it. She zipped and set it on the floor. She sat and stared at the wall. She was not surprised. That was the worst. She was not surprised. She had spent 40 years with this man, and she had known, somewhere deep and buried, he was capable of this. Just never let herself look. She thought about calling Sandy, thought about it for an hour. Then she did. Sandy answered on the second, voice thick with sleep. Maggie, it's 4 morning. Is everything okay? David Ferk. He's in the hospital. Broken leg. Oh my. Do you need to come? No, I'm fine. Maggie paused. She was sitting in a hospital room at 4 a.m, with a dead man's will in her husband's briefcase, and she needed to tell Sandy, I need to tell you something. And you're going to think I'm crazy. Try me, Maggie told her. Not the truth. She couldn't say loud. Not even to say. She told it as a dream. A long, vivid, terrible dream that had felt more real than anything. She told her about the 40 years and the neglect and the oxygen tube and the words. She bank account and the will and Aaron. She told her all of it, in the dark hospital room, slept 20 feet away. When Sandy was quiet for a then she said, Maggie, it was a dream or a memory or a you have to do. I know. Then do it. And if you need me, I'm here. Always. Maggie hung up. Shit, David, sleeping in the hospital bed, in sleep, less guard. Not feel pity. She did not feel anger. She felt something colder. A decision. David came home 10 days later and a week in rehab. The doctor had ordered a home health aide, 6-week day, covered by workers' comp. Maggie called the agency and arranged it. Not ask David if he wanted to take care of him. She did not. He was furious when he found out. You hired someone? He said, sitting on the couch with his leg pillows. The home health aide. A woman, Rosa, 50s, no, in the kitchen, tea. You're supposed to take care of me. Maggie was standing by the front door, on her coat. She was going to the library. I was your wife for 20 years, David. You never treated me like one. I'm not starting now because you broke your leg. He stared at her. Rosa chose that moment to come in with the tea. It was so thick you could stand on. Your tea, Mr. Holloway, Rosa said, setting it on the coffee table. He looked at Maggie, then at David, and said nothing. She had seen worse. Maggie left. She drove to the library, was down and the radio off, and thought about Lily, who had been spending more time at her friend Maya's house, and about the apartment listing she hadn't called about yet, and about the will in the briefcase and the necklace receipt and the name Karen Field. She was not going to take care of him. She was not going to cook his meals or change his bandages, or learn about the food or the TV or the weather. She had done that for 40 years in another life, and it had gotten her a tube and a sentence. She never would have married you. She was done, Eleanor. Called her sons that night. She had been to the house soon. Had seen Rosa, the home health aide. Seen David sitting on the couch alone while Maggie was at work. Margaret was refusing to care for him. Eleanor had sat with her son for an hour and told him she would fix this. She called David's estate lawyer, a man named Harold Finch, who had 5 years ago, and she asked him a question. Harold, if David decides to divorce Margaret, what's the worst-case scenario? Is there any way she could be left with minimal assets? I'm concerned about her state of mind. Herself. I think she may be having some kind of breakdown. Harold Finch was quiet for a moment. Eleanor, I can't advise on destabilizing your daughter-in-law, but if there are concerns about her mental fitness, that could be relevant in a custody and property dispute. You'd need psychiatric records, with statements. I have witnesses, Eleanor said. I have plenty of witnesses. She hung up. She sat in her kitchen in her house on the north side of town, and she thought about Margaret Bennett. the girl her son had married 20 years ago, quiet, mousy, from a family with a history. Eleanor had never approved. She had never said so to David's face, but she had known. There was something unstable in that family, something in the blood. She reached for her phone and called her sister. "Ruth, I need to ask you something. Do you remember Margaret's father? The one who, do you remember how it happened?" She listened. She took note. She smiled. Margaret Holloway thought she had secret. Eleanor had a bigger one. Patricia Voss's office smelled like coffee and old paper, and Maggie sat in the same chair she'd sat in 3 weeks earlier and listened to the lawyer talk. "They're preparing," Patricia said, laying a folder on the desk between them. "I got a call from Harold Finch's office yesterday. Informal, just sounding me out. He wanted to know if you'd retained counsel. I told him yes. He didn't say much after, but I know what it means." "What does it mean?" "It means they're getting... Your husband's mother has been in contact with Finch. They're building a..." Patricia opened the door. "They're going to argue that you've had a psychological... Your recent behavior change, stopping domestic labor, leaving the house without explanation, taking classes without consulting your husband. They'll frame it as evidence of instability. They'll bring in your mother-in-law as a witness. They may try to get your medical records. If they can paint you as unfit, they can go for full custody of your daughter and a larger share of the assets." Maggie felt her stomach drop. "Lily, they'd try. Joint custody is the default. But if they can convince a judge you're unstable, they could push for primary. Not full primary. You'd still see her, but they'd have full." Maggie sat with her for a minute. She thought about Lily, 16 and angry and sleeping at her friend's house 3 weeks. And she thought, who had never once helped homework, or attended a parent-teacher conference, or remembered that Lily was allergic to penicillin. And she thought about how unfair it was that he could try to take her daughter because Maggie had finally stopped making... "What do I do?" she said, put at her. "You fight back, but not the way they expect. You don't get emotional. You don't confront them. Build a case. You gather every piece of evidence you can, financial, digital, testimonial, and you wait until you have enough that they... Then you negotiate from strength." Maggie nodded. She had been waiting for someone to... No one had. She spent the next thing. The library's administrative office had a computer with internet access and a printer, and Maggie used her lunch breaks and her after-shift search. She looked up David's firm, Holloway & Associates Architecture, registered as an LLC in Oregon. David listed as managing partner with a 51% stake. She found the firm's public project filings with the city, including a mixed-use development downtown that had been approved this year. She cross-referenced the project budget with public records and discrepancy. A subcontractor payment that had been routed through a separate LLC, one David owned, had never mentioned. She didn't care. She printed everything and put it in a folder. At home, she waited until David was at a physiotherapy appointment. Rosa drove him. Office. His laptop was on the desk, closed. She opened it. The password screen came up. She typed LILY614, Lily's birthday, June 14th. The date David always remembered because it was the same as his favorite breaking. Laptop opened. Were steady. She had done this 100 times. She opened David's email, his personal account, not the work one, Karen. There were 407 emails. She didn't read them all. She searched for keywords. Hotel, weekend, gift, account. She found what she needed. Emails between David and Karen discussing a weekend the previous fall. Emails between David and Roger Chen, the financial advisor, discussing reallocation of marital separate accounts. An email from David to Karen that said, "I can't leave her yet." Not until Lily graduates, but after that. She took screenshots. She forwarded them to a new email she'd created that morning. margaret.bennett@gmail.com, like a promise. She deleted the David's account. She closed the laptop. She put it where she'd found it. She was in the kitchen making tea. Rosa came home. David was in a good mood. Physical therapy had gone well. He was walking on crutches now. The doctor said he might be off instead of 6. He told Maggie about it like they were a normal couple sharing news. And Maggie said, "That's good, David," and in a distant way. The way you mean it when a coworker to their cat is feeling better. She was not going to feel guilty for any of this. She had 40 years feeling guilty. She was done. She wrote the letter on a Tuesday night class. Marcus had stayed after class to story she'd shared. The first she'd written in 20 years. A short piece about a woman who makes soup for one and realizes it's the best soup she's ever made. Marcus had told her it was honest and she should send it out. Said maybe. Now she sat at the dining table. David's in the living room watching TV, his leg propped up, and paper and a pen. Dear, she stopped. She started again. Lily, I know things have been weird lately. I know you're confused, probably angry, and I don't blame you. Your dad and I are going through something, and I haven't been good at explaining it. That's my fault. I need you to know one thing. None of this is because of you. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't cause this, and you don't have to pick sides. You can love your dad and you can love things don't have to fight each other. I'm changing. I know that. I'm not the same mom I was 6 months ago, but I'm still your mom, and I'm still here. Whenever you're ready to talk, here. Mom, she read it. She put it in an envelope. She wrote Lily's name on the front. She didn't give it to her that night. She put it in her purse and carried it for 3 days. On Friday, when Lily came home from school and went straight to her room, Maggie slid the envelope under the door. She didn't hear anything on the other side. She didn't expect to. She went downstairs, made herself dinner, and tried not to think about it. David tried Karen next. He was doing it because he was desperate. He had tried silence and it hadn't worked. He had tried anger and it hadn't worked. He had tried being hurt and it hadn't worked. So one thing he thought might get a reaction. She knew about Karen. A phone call in the living room with the door open, and Maggie, who was in the kitchen, heard him say, "Yeah, I'll see you Saturday." "No, she doesn't care. It's Karen." He said Karen loud, like he was testing a microphone. Maggie, stirring a pot of chili, didn't look up. She didn't stop stirring. She didn't feel anything, not anger, not even curiosity. She was Karen for 20 years in another life. She had grieved. She had nothing left. David came into the kitchen after the call, leaned against the counter, watching. "That was Karen," he said. "From work. We're having dinner Saturday. Just a work thing." Maggie turned off the stove. She ladled chili into a bowl, one bowl. "David, you can have dinner with whoever you want, Mother. I don't need to know your schedule." Carried her bowl to the table and sat. He stood there for a long time. She could see him out of the corner of her eye, confused, off balance, like a man who had a door that was found it open. "You." Quieter this time. Looked up at him. "I'm the one. You just never." The kitchen. She heard him go upstairs. She ate her chili. It was good. She had made it with extra cumin. The way David always said was too. Patricia called on a Thursday afternoon. They made an offer, informal, through Finch. "David is willing to give you the house, title, and a lump sum of $50,000. In exchange, you waive any claim to his business interests, his retirement accounts, and any separately held financial accounts. You also agree to a non-disparagement clause and a quick divorce. No trial, no public record." Maggie was sitting in the library parking lot. She had just finished her shift. The sun was going down. "The secret account. She asked me to give up any secret account." "Exactly. He's betting you don't know about it, or if you do, that you don't have enough evidence to pursue it. The house plus $50,000, he thinks that's generous. He thinks you'll take it." Maggie thought about the house, the 4-bedroom colonial in the suburbs, the beige carpet, the kitchen where she'd made 20 years of breakfasts for a man who never said thank you. She thought about the apartment above the bookstore, $850 a month, east-facing windows. She thought about the bank account with $87,000, and the emails, and the will, and the project discrepancy. She smiled. "Tell him I have a counteroffer," she said, "but he's not going to like it." The mediation was held in a conference room on the 14th floor of a building downtown, the kind of room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a table so long it made everyone feel small. Maggie arrived 15 minutes early with Patricia. She was wearing the green blouse, the one with the tiny white flowers, the one she'd put on the first morning of her new life. She had her purse on her lap and a folder in her hand, and her hands were not shaking. She had imagined this room 1,000 times in her first life. She had imagined it differently. She had been crying, usually, or begging, or sitting in the corner while David talked for her. This time she was sitting at the head of the table, and she was not crying. David arrived with Harold Finch and Eleanor. Eleanor had insisted on coming. Maggie could see it in the way she walked. Shoulders back, chin up, the expression of a woman who had come to watch a victory. She sat down beside David and folded her hands on the table like she was presiding over a meeting. David looked tired. He had lost weight since the accident. His leg was still in a boot, but he was walking without crutches. He didn't look at Maggie. Harold Finch was a man in his 60s with a white mustache and a suit that cost more than Maggie made in a year. He opened his briefcase and took out a stack of paper. "Shall we begin?" "Patricia, we're ready." Harold cleared his. "Mrs. Holloway, my client has put forth a generous settlement proposal. The house, free and clear, plus a one-time payment of $50,000. In exchange, Mrs. Holloway waives all claim to. Before we get at Meg. Her voice was her. It carried across the bowl. Everyone looked at her. She opened her. I have something I'd like to enter into. She slid a folder across. It landed in front of Harold Finch. He flipped through the first pages. His mustache twitched. Is this? David said. Harold held. Reading. The room was silent, except for the sound of singing. Maggie watched Ellen's face. Fusion. Concern. Then something that lured her. He told her. Maggie. Mrs. Holloway, where did you obtain this? Lawfully, Patricia said before answer. Public records, documents left plain view, and communications obtained through authorized access to a matter. All admissible. Authorized access, Harold repeated. David's fail. Spoke. The folder contained 3 things. First, bank statements for an account in David's name only, currently holding approximately $87,000, opened in September 3. 7-year marriage. All deposits were made from income earned during the marriage, making it community property under Oregon law. Second, email correspondence between David and his financial advisor, Roger Chen, discussing the deliberate reallocation of marital assets in a separate account, with the stated goal of maximizing protection in the evolution. Third, email correspondence between David and Karen Whitfield, a colleague at his firm, confirming an ongoing extramarital relationship dating back at least 2 years, including a weekend trip to Seattle in last year. She paused. She let it land. There's also a 4th item, she said. Public records showing that David's firm routed a subcontractor payment for the downtown mixed-use project through a separate LLC that David owns, but did not disclose returns. I'm not a lawyer, so I won't speculate on whether that's legal, but I'm fairly certain the firm's board would be interested in reviewing it. They have a quarterly meeting this month, don't they, David? David's mouth was open. He closed it. He opened it again. You went through my computer? You've been spying on me? I've been protecting myself, Maggie said. There's a difference. Ellen spoke for the first time. Her voice was tight. This is outrageous. This woman has really been planning this for months. She's unstable. She's been acting erratically. She's been neglecting her husband. She's been leaving hours. Eleanor, Patricia said, still water. If you'd like to make a case for my client's mental fitness, please do so on the record. I'd be happy to present her employment records, her recent enrollment in a continuing education course, and care from her workplace. I think you'll find she's quite stable. More stable, perhaps, than a man who hides $87,000 from his wife coworker. Eleanor's face turned. She looked at Harold. Harold was staring at the folder. He did not look at Eleanor. Let's talk numbers, Maggie. She had rehearsed this. She knew exactly what she wanted. I'm not asking for the house. I'm not asking for alimony. I'm not asking for his retirement or his business. I'm asking for one thing, half of the separate account. $40,206. That's my half of the money he earned during our marriage and hid from me. I'm also asking for joint legal and full custody of our daughter, Lily, with a standard parenting plan. No primary custody. Equal time. That's it. Harold looked at David. David looked at Eleanor. Harold. No one spoke. That's less than the original offer, Patricia pointed out. The house is worth probably more than $43,000. My client is being more reasonable. Stood up. His leg wobbled. He steadied himself on the table. I don't believe this, said. His voice was cracking. I don't believe you. You're not the married. Maggie looked at him. She thought about the ox tube. She thought about the word. If I married you. You're right, she said. I'm not. A long time ago. Just didn't notice. I'm quiet. David sat down. He pulled away. Eleanor, who played the last card. She had been sitting in silence for 5 minutes while Harold and Patricia negotiated the final terms, custody schedule, division of personal property. Then she leaned forward. Before we sign anything, she said, there's something you should know. About Margaret's family. Maggie felt her stomach. She didn't know what Eleanor was talking about. Margaret's father, Eleanor said, looking at Harold, not at Maggie. He committed suicide when Margaret was 18, bankruptcy. He shot himself in the garage. There's a history in that family. Instability. I think it's relevant to the custody question. But still, Maggie felt her face get hot. She had not thought about her father in years. Not because she didn't love him, but because the grief was too big, and she had buried it of marriage and motherhood and making toast. She had never told David tales. She had told him that it was sudden, hard. Suicide. She had not said gunshot. She had not said David was looking at her. He didn't know. She could see it on his face. He didn't know. Eleanor had never told him. Saved it for like this. He took a breath. She looked at Eleanor. My father killed himself because he was ashamed of war, she said. Her voice did not shake. He couldn't face starting over, made a terrible choice. I was 18. I found him. The last 24 years, not to be like him. Trying to be strong. Trying to be quiet. Trying to never let anyone see me struggle. That's not mental illness, Eleanor. That's trauma. And if you want to talk about family mental health, let's talk about your son, who can't love anyone but himself, hides money and cheats on his wife and thinks that's normal. She stopped. She was breathing hard. She looked at Patricia. Patricia gave her a small, almost acceptable nod. Harold finned his folder. I think of the terms, he said. He did not look at Eleanor. Half the separate account. Joint custody. Standard parenting plan. No alimony. No house. Mrs. Holloway, do you it? Maggie looked at David. He was staring at the table. His leg was bouncing. He looked than she had ever seen him. I accept, said. They signed papers. Maggie signed her name. Margaret Holloway, Margaret Bennett again. And she did not hesitate. She was here when David called her name. She turned. Away. The conference room door closing behind him. He was alone. Ellen and Harold had gone the other way. He said. What you said about another life, about dying. She looked at him. She thought about telling him. She thought about saying, I died once and you killed me and I came back and I'm never going back. Watching his face when speaking metaphorically, she didn't. He didn't deserve the truth. He had earned silence. David, she said. It's over. She got on the elevator. The door closed. She watched his face disappear behind the stainless steel. She was outside the building, standing on the sidewalk in the May sun, when her phone buzzed. She took it out. A text from Lily. Mom, can we get coffee this weekend? Just us. Maggie stood on the sidewalk and read it 3 times. Then she sat down on the curb and put her face in her hands and cried. She cried for the 18-year-old girl who found her father in the garage. She cried for the 22-year-old bride who thought love was something you earned by being good. She cried for the 42-year-old woman who had died once and come back and had to fight for every single thing that should have been hers. She cried for a long time. Then she wiped her face, took a deep breath, and texted back. Yes, baby. I'd like that. She stood up. She adjusted the green blouse. She walked to her car. The sun was shining. The apartment was above a bookstore on Oak Street. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. A kitchen so small you could touch both counters at the same time. The rent was $875 a month, utilities included. And the landlord was a retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Alvarez, who lived downstairs and brought Maggie empanadas on Sundays. Maggie moved in on the 1st of August. She had taken half the secret account, $43,206, deposited into her own checking account the day the divorce was final, and she used the first month's rent and security deposit and bought a used couch from Good and a bed frame from a woman on Craigslist and a set of dishes that didn't match because she liked them that way. The apartment was her. The east-facing window in the living room caught the mornings, and Maggie set up a small desk, an old wooden thing she'd found at a garage sale for $20. Wobbly, and on it she put her laptop and a lamp and a stack of books in the frame. The check was for $75. It was from a small literary magazine based in Pacific Northwest, and it was payment for her story, The Woman Who Made Soup. The editor had written a personal note on the accept. This piece stated, "Thank you for reading it." Maggie had framed the check, because the check proof that she had done, that someone had paid her for, that she existed outside of being someone's wife and someone. She hung it on the wall above. She looked at it. Her life settled into them, and it was a rhythm. Monday through Friday, she worked at the library from 9. She had asked for and been given more hours, and her supervisor had promoted her to head of the adult services department, which came with a small raise and a key to the building. She reshelved books and helped people find jobs and printed resumes for teenagers and recommended novels to retirees. She loved it. She had just never let her. Tuesday and Thursday evenings she went to. The 8-week session had ended, but the instructor had started an ongoing workshop, and Maggie went. Mark there too. And they had friends. The kind of friends who emailed each other drafts and met for coffee on Saturdays, and talked about sentences and structure and the particular agony of writing a second story after the first got accepted. Marcus was kind and smart and married to a woman named Diane, who taught biology at the college. And there was nothing between friendship. And that was exactly it. She was not anything else. She was not. Wednesday nights, she went to Sandy's flower shop and helped arrange bouquets for these. Sandy taught her how to condition stems and choose complementary colors and wrap a bouquet so it looked effortless. And in return, Maggie read Sandy's books and helped her write a business plan for expanding wedding flowers. They drank cheap wine and listened to old jazz and talked about nothing. And Maggie thought about how many Wednesday nights she had spent at home, alone, watch TV, because she had thought were for Lily. They had coffee every Saturday morning at a place called the Daily Grind on Main Street. Lily ordered a vanilla latte, and Maggie ordered black coffee, and they sat and talked. At first it was awkward. Lily asked about the apartment, and Maggie asked about school, and they danced around the room. But by the third day, Lily said, "Mom, can I ask you something?" Maggie said, "Always." And Lily said, "Unhappy? With Dad? All those years?" Maggie thought about it. She thought about 40 years and tow oxygen tubes, and a will that said then living spouse. She thought about the bin at 22, standing in a church and made herself, thinking that love was something enough. "I was asleep, baby," she said. "A long time I was asleep. I woke up." Lily looked at her. She had David's eyes, gray, serious, but she had Maggie's mouth. The same slight downturn at the corners that made her look she wasn't. "I'm glad you," she said. Maggie reached across the hand on Lily. They sat like that for a minute, neither of them speaking, while it buzzed around them. Writing poetry. Maggie knew, because she'd found a note in Lily's backpack when she'd dropped her at the apartment one afternoon. Lily had left it on the couch, and Maggie had picked it up to put it on the table, and the cover had fallen open, and she'd seen the words scrawled in Lily's handwriting, and she'd closed it immediately and put it down and never mentioned it. She didn't need to read it. She knew what it was to need a place you couldn't say out loud. David called in September. He was at the apartment making soup, tomato, the same kind she'd that first night in the old house, the night she'd seen Karen's text. Her phone rang, and she saw his name on the screen, and she didn't answer. But she did. "Maggie," he said. His voice sounded different, or somehow, or just... "Talk? About what?" "About everything. About us. About what happened. I've been thinking a lot, and David." She was stirring the soup. The smell filled the small apartment. "We talked for 20 years. You never have anything left to say." There was a long silence on the other end. Then he said, "I miss you." Maggie turned off the stove. She ladled soup into a bowl. Desk by the window, sat down. "David," she said, quiet now. "You didn't miss me when I was in the same house. You didn't miss me when I was making your coffee and your toast and your dinner and your life. You don't miss me now. You miss having someone who takes care of you. And that's not the same thing." She hung up, ate her soup. It was good. She never heard from her again. She heard about her, though. Cindy ran into her at the grocery store in October, and Eleanor had looked right through her and pushed her cart aisle like Sandy was invisible. Sandy told Maggie about it. They both laughed, and Maggie thought, good. Let her be invisible. She had spent 20 years to Eleanor in all the wrong ways. Karen left David in November. Maggie heard about it from David's former receptionist, a girl named Tina, who came into the library one afternoon and recognized Maggie and said, "Oh my God, you're David's ex-wife." "I quit. Couldn't take it anymore." Karen left him. Said he was impossible. Said all he does is talk about himself and never asks anyone how they are. I told her that's what he's always been like until she lived with him. Tina laughed. "He's alone in that big house now. Eats frozen dinners. I saw his lights on at the whole place looked dark." He met her. She didn't triumphant. She did not feel vindicated. She felt a quiet, distant sadness, the kind you feel for a stranger you once knew, who made an undo and now has to live. She'd be okay. She really did. He was not going to be the one to make him okay. It was a Tuesday when she woke up and realized it had been a year, March 14th. She was 3. She lay in bed for a minute, listening to the city wake up below her window, a truck backing up, a dog, a kid laughing on his way to school. The sun was coming through the east-facing window, across the foot of the bed, a tangle of gold. She got up, went to the kitchen, put on water for coffee. She took down one mug, hers, a chips cat on it that Sandy had given her for Christmas. She poured the coffee, Half. She stood at the window, thought about the last year. The bank account, the lawyer, hospital, the briefcase, the door, the conf room on the 14th floor, the curb where she'd cried, the apartment above the bookstore, the desk by the window, for $75, the day mornings with Lily, the Wednesday nights with Sandy, writing class, the second out, and was waiting to hear on. She thought about David, alone in the big house with the beige and the blue mug in the cabin of frozen dinners. Eleanor, pushing her down the cereal aisle. She thought Karen, who had learned what Maggie had known for 40 years. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Lily. Happy birthday, Mom. Coffee at 10? My treat. Another from Sandy. Wine tonight. I'm bringing the good bottle. Don't argue. Another from Marcus. Diane and I are taking you to dinner Thursday. No excuses. Happy birthday, Maggie smiled. She set down her coffee. She put on her shoes, worn sneakers, comfortable, the kind she could walk in all day. She picked up her bag. She locked the apartment door behind her. She walked down the stairs and out onto Oak Street. The sun was warm on her face. The bookstore below her was opening. The owner, a man named Arthur, was rolling up the gate, and he waved when he saw her. She waved back. She turned left and walked toward Main Street, toward the coffee shop where Lily would be waiting, toward the day, toward whatever came next. She didn't know what the next 40 years would bring, but for the first time in her life she was going to find out for herself.